This is not the RX100 Mark VII, this is the RX100 Mark V, but the RX100 Mark VII looks more or less the same, except for a couple of things. So before we get to those, let's take a quick run through of the specs on this brand new expensive compact camera from Sony. So it's got a 20.1 megapixel 1-inch sensor. It's got the 3-inch flip up screen, which you can rotate 180 degrees. You can also tilt it down a little bit. It's got a 2.8 to 4.5 lens, which will basically go from 24mm right up to 200mm. So you've got a nice zoom in that as well, depending on what you're shooting. It's got the world's fastest autofocus. It's got this crazy animal and artificial intelligence eye autofocus that also works in video. This is kind of in some of the higher end Sony cameras like the a6400. It's in the new RX100 Mark IV. And with a firmware upgrade, a lot of those autofocus features are in the a7 III as well. However, it's not just for photo. Those features also work insanely well in video, which is incredible. So basically, you will never be out of focus, more or less. And speaking of focus, this has got 357 phase detect points, which covers about 66% of the screen. And this camera, in all the time I've used it, and this is like 2 generations old, it's never lost focus. It's always kept me in focus. So even back then, Sony have been on point, but it's the fastest autofocus in the world, 0.02 seconds. Now that, yeah, we won't go into speed and what other things could take 0.02 seconds. The couple of downfalls that the RX100 series have had up until now is that, number one, 4K had a recording limit of 5 minutes. Now, I used to do 4K videos on this, talking head stuff, and every 5 minutes it would just shut down. So the camera would shut down, the thermals in it, the camera would just get too hot, so it would shut down. On the RX100 Mark VII, there is no 4K recording limit. None. Whatsoever, which is insane, which is really, really good for a camera this size, that it's able to do 4K until the battery runs out, more or less. And keep in mind, you can power these cameras with like a USB battery pack. You could just keep going with 4K forever, which is really, really good for creators who do a lot of talking head videos. It's incredibly frustrating experience to use this camera for those types. So that's a huge, huge win. The other huge win for 4K on the RX100 Mark VII is it's got image stabilization now in the 4K modes, because on this one, the old RX100 series, the 6, the 5, the image stabilization was good at 1080. But it didn't work in 4K. So 4K was always a little bit jittery. Now it's that little bit smoother. I mean, we're not talking gimbal stabilization. We're not talking GoPro stabilization or like an Osmo Pocket or a Panasonic GH5 or anything. No, but we are talking it's going to make the footage look that little bit better. It's not going to replace your gimbal. That's one huge positive, right? The other one, and probably for anyone that's in the content creation space that would, you know, be out and about vlogging in particular, the lack of a mic input on this camera was a nightmare. And finally, 7 iterations in, they have put in a mic input. Go Sony. Awesome. They've put in a mic. Yeah, it was a huge request list for ages. Everybody expected on the last generation, the Mark VI never came. They were just like, hey, whatever, screw you. Now you have a mic input. The only thing is it doesn't have a hot shoe mount. So you have to either put the Mark VII into a cage and then put on your mic on top, or Sony are of course peddling a kind of a vlogger kit which comes with a bracket that you can put the mic on the side, which is fine. That's okay. My first thought is, because I absolutely idolize this camera and was lost, I was devastated. It is phenomenal. The battery life, however, hasn't changed. So the battery life in this sucks. Although I've looked at Ted on Art of Photography. Hi Ted. I know you'll never see this. And he ran the camera on one battery, constantly recording 4K for an entire hour. That was an hour straight. And that was pretty impressive. To me, and the amount of videos I've shot with this, that says to me they've improved, obviously, thermals in it, so you can shoot 4K continuously. But it also shows that the battery life, they've maximized the innards of the camera, so they're getting more out of the battery. So you still will need a couple of batteries. You know, the batteries you can see here, they're small. And I've been thinking, will I go for something like this? Because I'm aching for another camera. I'm aching for, you know, maybe an interchangeable lens camera. And I was thinking, $1,200 for this. So it's $1,200. It's $1,600 Canadian. It's like £1,200 British, and then it's 12. I'm not even sure what it is in euro, because this one, the 5 was 1199.99. It was 1,200 quid, and yeah, they're really pricey. That said, if you look after these cameras, they will last you a lifetime. But are these upgrades, continuous 4K, slightly perceived battery life, and a mic input, is that enough to pay 1,200 quid for? 1,200 bucks. When you look at something like the Canon G7X series, which have got a mic input, I don't know. The fact is, it's a 24 to 200mm lens, so you will be able to get a little bit of bokeh. It's 2.8, so you can't open it wide out on the aperture. This was 1.8, which was crazy good in low light. The 2.8 kind of did stretch it, and of course, once you start zooming at all in this new camera, and then same with the Mark 6, the aperture, you are not going to get 2.8 at 200mm fully zoomed. Not going to happen. I would love, if I had the money to burn, I would probably buy this camera simply because of the size of it. It is an absolute powerhouse. The image quality from the photo perspective, it's incredible. It genuinely is an amazing camera. If it had slightly better battery life, I might consider, but you're still like, you're 200mm. So depending on what you want to do, you're like, And I'm thinking maybe, is something like the Sony A6400, so that's like $800, buy maybe one of the cheaper kit lens. You're probably going to get it all for like $1,100, $1,200 on that. You're literally getting a kind of a similar spec for video. It's more or less the exact same, but you have that luxury of being able to change the lenses. So I think that's what you have to weigh up. If you're like a travel vlogger, if you're vlogging constantly on the go and you don't want to be dragging a bag of lenses around with you, which is always a thing. The more gear you get, that means the more gear you have to drag. And that was one of the things for me. I didn't have to be dragging around the big old Canon that I had and a bunch of different lenses and swapping out lenses and stuff like that. I love this camera. I genuinely do. And I'm really kind of torn right now whether I should sell this on and look at getting the Mark 7. It's just the battery life will be a killer. Even though I've got like a bunch of batteries for this, it still takes the same battery, so that's not a thing, you know. But that's what you got to ask yourself. What would you use that camera for? For somebody that's starting out in content creation, $1,200. I mean, you could buy a cheaper camera, lights, mics, the whole 9 yards for $1,200 if you were kind of somewhat serious about starting out. And it's not that it's an advanced camera or anything like that, the Mark 7. It's an incredible camera, don't get me wrong. But it's what you want to do with it. Do you want interchangeable lenses? Do you want to, you know, maybe buy something like the Sony A6400 and buy one of their incredibly expensive G Master lenses, which are incredibly sharp and take beautiful images? Or do you want this, which will allow you to create amazing content, but it will restrict you in what you can do from the lens perspective on the telephoto end, on the zoom side of things? So it's a kind of a big question. Is it worth the $1,200? I think it's really expensive. You have got some amazing features in there, like the autofocus. It's super fast, 0.02 seconds, and the RX100 Mark 7 is an incredible camera. Personally, I don't see enough in it to warrant to spend $1,200 on it, given that what I want to do is go back and have interchangeable lens cameras and stuff like that. And you've got to weigh it up as well. Take a look at something like the Osmo Pocket, which is you know, like 3 times cheaper nearly, and that will give you more options on video. Bit rates will be similar, but you can get that 4K 60 if you so wish. I don't know. I just really see. Here's the thing: A6400. I'm really tempted with something like the A6400 simply because it's got the option to change your lenses. It doesn't have any image stabilization, so you'd have to buy like a little mini gimbal for it as well. So like, I guess to be really honest, when I got this camera, I was not a year into vlogging. I guess I was a couple of months. and it was very expensive just to start out with. But man, just this camera, there's kind of something about it. Do you know where you kind of bond with certain things? You know, you might have that TV in your house that you would never get rid of because you've had it since you were a kid, or you've got some, like, this is one of these items for me. Even though a minute ago I said I would sell it, I don't think I could. I genuinely idolize this camera. It has performed flawlessly, besides the gripes and the battery and the 4K limit and the no mic. But even the onboard mics were decent. But what I would suggest you do is think about not what you want to shoot today or tomorrow, but think about in 12 months time, will you be able to use something like the Sony RX100 Mark VII for what you want to do? Because as you grow as a content creator and a filmmaker and a photographer, will something like that suit you? You know, some people are obsessed with aesthetics. That doesn't look like a vlogging camera. It's got the flippy up screen, but it's not the big huge camera that some people seem to just gotta have a big huge camera. But it's as good and it's a lot better than what I have here. Mwah. I could not recommend this camera highly enough, but you gotta really figure out what you want to do with it. The limitations I found with this one at the time were the battery life, the 4K limit. They've kind of fixed the 4K recording limit now, so it's unlimited. The battery life seems a little bit better. Battery life isn't a gripe if you can charge via a battery pack and keep it running continuously. So yeah, think about in 12 months time, what do you want to do? I always would have liked a longer lens on this. So I'm genuinely thinking about maybe going for the Mark VII. But for you, think about what you need to do in 12 months time. Maybe you want to go full frame. Because so many of us would want to go full frame camera at some point from a content creation perspective, like an A7 III or something like that, or maybe the A7S III when it comes out in 2091. But yeah, it's a really tough one. I'm just kind of waxing lyrical to you guys on this. Specs are good. The mic input and the 4K unlimited, is it worth $1,200? No, it's not. It's a lot of money for two little things that should have been in the camera at least 2 years ago when everybody else has those options. But this is an incredible camera from Sony. It is absolutely phenomenal. People are calling it the Mini A9. In case you don't know, the A9 is the kind of one of the big, huge Sony flagship cameras, but it's got more or less similar power under the hood. The image quality is phenomenal. It's amazing. I can't say enough good things about this camera, even though I haven't got one yet. So you got to think, and I got to think about what I'm going to do. If that makes sense, do you really need a $1,200 compact camera that the most you'll probably have to drag around is a little tripod or a little gimbal and a few batteries, as opposed to a big bag of lenses? Food for thought. Thanks for watching. My name is Vic Barry. We talk all kinds of camera and tech gear here, and we're just waxing lyrical on this brand new camera. If anybody from Sony is watching, can I get into the list to try these out? I would genuinely love to get hold of one of these to try it out, just for a week. Because as much as I love the camera I'm shooting this video on right now, the Osmo Pocket, my heart is well and truly belonging to this camera, the RX100. It's been all over the world with me. We've had some amazing adventures together. You can just hold... I'm talking myself into this RX100 Mark VII. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Really appreciate your time. Let me know in the comments, what do you think of the new Sony camera? Is it something that you'd go for, or do you think, hey man, look, this is $1,200. I could get a camera and a whole bunch of lenses for $1,200. You know? So yeah, that's what you got to think about. So hopefully I've given you a little bit of food for thought. But thumbs up to Sony. This is like a beast of a camera, and the size. I just wish they could put one of those Z batteries into that bloody size camera, and then it would be amazing. Anyway, I'm out of here. We'll see you in the next one. And as we always say, most importantly, even if you're a new viewer, we say this at the end of every episode. And think about what it says. I'm not going to explain what it means. You got to think about that. And we always end with, don't stop fighting for yourself.